Hi, everyone. This is an excerpt from my 6 weeks of mindfulness course. This is one of the teachings that we go over in that course and one that we'll continue to go over. This course runs every 6 weeks. There'll be information at the end of the video and down below for how to apply or register for this course. And it's really for anybody who is interested in either starting a meditation practice or deepening, maybe a beginning meditation practice, not so much for more experienced practitioners, if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. But without further ado, here is my talk on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness and some other discussions about the nature of suffering. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you all for sharing how you're feeling. So last week, well, just a quick word about how the structure is going to work today. We're going to do a quick talk. It will be shorter than last week's. We will do questions on that talk, and then we will do practice discussions after that. And we'll probably do a breakout room, two breakout rooms, since there's only six of you, where you each can three of you can talk with each other. So last week, we introduced this concept of suffering and this idea of noticing suffering in our lives, and suffering as kind of the basis for expanding our practice. And we're going to continue with that theme throughout the whole course, and we're just going to kind of frame it differently each week and different ways that we can notice suffering. So, this word that we often are referring to in Buddhist tradition when we say suffering is this word dukkha. It's the Pali word dukkha, and it often gets translated as suffering. It is really not the most accurate translation. You really hear a lot of people, because to hear like life is suffering to our Western and English minds, it makes it sound like when the Buddha said there is suffering, and this is just kind of like the base reality of life, that we are experiencing negative affects in every moment of life or something, or that there's just negative affect constantly, and then that's what suffering is, or we are plagued by physical or psychological pain, and that's what suffering is. But there are some other translations I want to introduce this week that when he said there is suffering, there is dukkha, really what that word can also translate to is something like thirst. There is thirst. My favorite translation is there is an endless need to fix. That is a better way of understanding when the Buddha said there is suffering, and this is kind of everything is suffering, life is suffering. What he was really pointing to is that nothing really satisfies us. Any good experience passes. Every good experience is followed by a difficult one. And in the midst of every bad experience, we want something good. And in the midst of every good experience, we want to keep it forever. So there's this incessant need to fix, to kind of tweak, to kind of be like, the room could be 1 degree warmer, right? And then it's just too warm. and then it could be 1 degree cooler. And so when we're working with this theme of noticing suffering in our lives, often what can happen is when people start to look, they get attracted to they believe they're noticing suffering when they're saying like, oh, my knee's in pain, that's suffering, or I'm sad, or I'm angry, that's suffering. And there is some suffering in that. But the suffering the Buddha was talking about was actually in our need to fix that, our need to tweak that. It wasn't in the experience itself. The experience of anger, the experience of sadness, the experience of physical pain, death, aging, sickness. This is what the Buddha said we're all subject to. Everyone is subject to death, aging, and illness. And so there's someone came to the Buddha once and said, I've been practicing for a long time now, and yet I still get sick. My body still hurts. I still undergo psychological distress. You're saying this is the end of suffering, but here are all these things. And the Buddha's response was, there are two arrows. This is the teaching of the two arrows. The first arrow hits us, and that is the arrow of, say, physical pain. And he said the Dharma can do nothing about that. The Dharma can do nothing about the first arrow of pain that hits us. That is just what life is. But then there's the second, the third, and the fourth arrow of everything we do in reaction to the first, of all of the struggle and striving and difficulty that goes into trying to fix the first arrow. And so around this idea of how do we loosen, soften around our need to fix, the Buddha gave this teaching called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. We're going to go over the three. So the first is the body form, the experience of what's happening in your body. This is the first foundation of mindfulness. This is often why when you start learning mindfulness, it's pay attention to the breath, pay attention to the body, feel the body, the first foundation of mindfulness. All right, we're all pretty familiar with that, I would say. The second is one that we're not much familiar with, and Zach and I have had a conversation about this once because the term feeling tone has a very specific meaning in Buddhism, and it's this Pali word Vedana. And feeling tone is the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral thing that co-arises with every experience. So with everything we experience, it co-arises with either being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And this was an important teaching in the Buddha emphasized, was being mindful of this thing itself, not just of the feeling in the body. So it's not just, oh, there's pain in my knee. The pain has a physical resonance to it, like you can feel the sensation, but co-arising with the feeling of pain is this is unpleasant. And you can imagine two different kinds of pain: a pain from lifting heavy weights where you're sore, and the exact same physical sensation, but could be from like a chronic illness. And one could co-arise with pleasant if you're sore and you feel like you just PR'd or you just did something, and one could co-arise with unpleasant. But the physical sensation is the same. The actual feeling in your body is the same. And then the third foundation is just all of the habits of mind, or sometimes it's translated as intention, the way that we then react with an intention to do something about that. So you can imagine there's kind of this chain of events in all of our experiences. Something arises in the body or in the mind. It co-arises with being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Our mind then categorizes it and says, this is good, this is bad, this is not important. And then we react with this intention to cling, to hold on to get more of, to push away, to change, to get rid of, or to check out from, and to just say that I don't need to pay attention to this. And this is really the whole conditioning of suffering in just these three things. It is just experience, positive, negative, neutral, and our reaction to that. That's it. And there's this kind of flow. I want you guys to notice how this happens, especially with things that are unpleasant. Something arises and it's, I don't like this. And then we make this move, something is wrong. This moment is bad. This feeling is bad. And then it's, I need to change it. I can't change it. I don't like that I can't change it. Something is wrong, and it must be me. I must be wrong. And this is really the root of self-loathing, and which is some of the deepest pain we experience. When we try to change things we can't, and we believe we should be able to, the only arrow that can be pointed at is something's wrong with me, right? I must be wrong. And all of this can break away by just being willing to notice that these experiences, body, feeling, tone, intention, the Buddha called there's five, but he called them the five aggregates of experience. There's five aggregates that we kind of just group together. Aggregates is the word because we aggregate them together and we're just like, this is one experience. But as you start to be mindful of these foundations of mindfulness, you can actually pick them apart. You can say, ah, there's this physical sensation. There is the feeling tone that arises. And then there's my desire to change. And they're not all the same thing. They're not all, they happen so quick that they can seem like the same thing, but they're not actually the same thing. And so this is going to be the emphasis of our practice this week is noticing that, oh, I have a thought. That thought co-arises with pleasant. I want more of it. And to just observe this reactivity, to observe our minds doing this. I want to have some words on working with this. And when we're in difficult moments, when we're in moments of suffering that are too great for us, that we can't really work with. The beautiful thing about this teaching is it also allows us to be aware of feeling tone as something where we can rest our minds in the midst of difficult moments. So if you have pain in your knee and it's becoming, and it doesn't feel like I can work with that pain, I can actually, I can't break it apart to see like, oh, there's this feeling tone as my reaction to it. I can't do that. It's just, it's too painful and I'm absorbed with it. Well, what you can do though is look for positive feeling tone in your body. You can look somewhere else. You can say, where can I feel something positive? And that was kind of the leading of the instruction that we first did is in the midst of deep suffering, instead of just being like, okay, let me just like work with this, saying, okay, let me widen. Can I find something positive? Can I hear something positive? Can I hear birds? Can I hear something that, if you can't, okay, can I find something neutral? Can I look for a neutral experience in my body? And that can be stabilizing. And I can kind of fill back up on my ability to be present and then come back to this difficult experience. And if that's all too much, what you can do is widen your experience as much as possible. Make your experience wide. Hear the furthest sound you can make so that whatever difficulty you're feeling, you realize is quite small in comparison to your whole mind. Your mind is quite vast. So I just wanted to say a few things on what to do if in the process of working with suffering, we get into the midst of really deep suffering and we're just trying to like work with it and it doesn't feel useful. There are no heroics here in practice. No attempts to just deal with any amounts of suffering at any time, and to have some strategies for coping with when suffering becomes too much can be very supportive. So with this, there's a reason why the body is the first foundation of mindfulness. And I'll really want to emphasize why we come back to the body. We come back to the body. You can be mindful of just your mind. You can be mindful of just your thoughts. But the analogy I heard of our mind is, I had a teacher who used to take his dog to the beach and say his dog used to run ahead of him and run behind him and run ahead of him and run behind him. And he was like, this is your mind. Your mind is constantly running to the future, running to the past, running to the future, running to the past. And to your mind, the present is just this dispensable moment. It's just completely dispensable. It's just to be used in planning for the future or learning from the past. That's it. That's all your mind considers the present to be. Your body is always here, just experiencing the moment. Having the habit of returning back to your body is incredibly grounding because your body can't conceptualize. It's not that there's anything wrong with conceptualization. It's very powerful and can be used in a lot of ways in practice. But when things become really confusing and difficult, your body's always just here. What's happening here? And that is it. That's all I'm going to talk about this week is just introducing this idea of the four foundations of mindfulness. We're really just going to be focusing on three. And this week, we just want to observe these reactions. We have experience in the body, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. We react to pleasant by clinging, react to neutral by checking out, and react to unpleasant by pushing it away. And to just observe this in our minds, and the more familiar we get with this, the more these experiences kind of break apart and we can kind of unhook from them. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and we'll have more coming in the future. And if you're interested in joining the 6 weeks of mindfulness course, I'm going to try and put a link maybe here. And then also there'll be information down below. And thank you so much.